Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, welcome. I'm Libbie and I'm back today with another video for my sort of law writing essay series. So it has been quite a long time, and I know I said in the first video I did about essays that I would do another one and that I had more to say about it. So it's taken me this long to get around to it, but I'm going to run you through my steps to writing essays for law and like all of the steps that I take, and sort of give you my advice and tips and things that I sort of do and things that I've picked up along the way to write essays. So as I've just mentioned, I've already made a video on writing essays, which was some of my tips. So if you want to hear any more about this, or like more of my tips and things that I've picked up, definitely go and watch that. I will link it down below because there's a lot of my sort of advice in there and stuff as well. So I would definitely recommend watching that if you're interested. But yeah, this one's going to be me taking you through sort of everything that I do to write an essay, sort of in chronological order, with all of my tips and things that I do along the way. So I have made some notes, so if you wonder why I'm looking over there, that's why. I've got my laptop here, so I will hopefully not forget anything. But yeah, let's get straight into it. So obviously with an essay, you sometimes get to choose a question, you sometimes don't, but depending on the question, you might have to either sort of like break it down into parts and see what it's asking you if it's like a little bit of a bigger question, and perhaps not if it's like critically analyse like this judgment or something. But even then I would still break it down into headings that I want to talk about in my argument. So basically how I structure my essays is, a lot of the way that I will do it is by taking the essay question, doing some of the reading and thinking, right, what's my argument and how am I going to argue it, and I'll split it into headings, and then I'll pop all of my notes for each thing, any extra reading I do for each sort of heading, under each heading in my essay notes. So then when I'm writing a paragraph, I can refer to that section of my notes for that section of the essay. Some essays as well, like if they're really nice, they'll say critically analyse this with reference to judicial review of prerogatives, conventions and something else, which was my first constitutional essay, which is so nice because it's basically giving you your three headings and you know where to like then go and do your reading and research about. But in second year they're not that nice to us anymore, so I very much have to come up with my own headings after I've broken the question down and really identified what it's asking me. And also when I get the question, I have to sort of identify the topic that the question is asking about, because you don't want to go off on a tangent and be talking about something that's not really relevant to what the question's asking you about. So just identifying like what the topic is and what it's actually asking you about, which should be like usually quite obvious, I think. I do think some people make the mistake of not necessarily like answering the question or understanding what topic the question is on. So the next thing that I go on to do after I've sort of like broken the question down into component parts, I might not have come up with my headings until after I've done a bit of the reading for my essay, so that might actually come a little bit later. But I will then go and look into my lecture notes, any seminar notes that I have, all of that sort of stuff, and start copying and pasting anything that I think is relevant to that essay title into like a master document that I'll put all of my notes in, so all of my academic commentary, all of my case law and all of that sort of stuff in. And yeah, I definitely like to look at seminar notes and stuff because they give you little prompts sometimes, so little questions that aren't necessarily an essay question might prompt you into a certain way of analysing something that you might not otherwise have thought of, and you can sort of include it in your argument. So I will always start with my lecture notes, which will obviously have my textbook reading in there as well, and yeah, seminar notes. So the next thing that I generally do would be to look at any cases that I think are really relevant. So in one of the essays that I'm doing at the moment, it literally specifically speaks about a judgment, and you have to critically analyse the judgment, so obviously I need to go and read the judgment. Also, if you can tell that a question's like asking you about a certain case, or a case is really important to the theory or whatever you're being asked about, I will always then go and read that judgment pretty much before anything else. I will sometimes read like a case comment or like some blog posts about it if it's like more recent, just to get a general feel of it, so I know roughly what I'm reading about when I read it, because judgments can be quite sort of like long and a lot of words, so sometimes find it a bit helpful to like read like a couple of blog posts or commentary. But the judgments identified in the question, or judgments that you think are really important, are the things that I would always start with and get them out of the way, because they will for me, they really shape my analysis, and that's just a really good starting point for me. So then when I go on to read academic commentary and stuff, I really understand the case in the first place. Also will use quotes from judgment in my essay. So yeah, I just think that's a really important place to start. That's where I start. So I find blog posts can be really helpful for sort of general understanding, and I have found them quite helpful in the past. Depending on the essay, sometimes there's not really anything on it, but the only thing is that I read them more for my understanding than I do for actually referencing them, because you have to be really careful what sources you're using, that you're getting things from a reputable source. If you're getting it from a blog and it's like a very sort of conversational blog and the person that's written it isn't like a top lecturer or an academic, I wouldn't reference it, and I would also just make sure that you check everything that's being said and not necessarily sort of like take it all 100%. Definitely like think about what you're reading. I do that more for my understanding, and I wouldn't necessarily reference blog posts, maybe occasionally, but I would definitely much more rely on the cases and the academic commentary, because they generally are better sources and they are the better things to be using. Saying that, I find blogs really helpful, especially I remember in constitutional, like there was an academic that used to come up a lot. I think it was Paul Craig, who's a lecturer at Oxford, and he also had a blog, which was amazing because it's just so much more digestible. So after I've done any of this sort of reading with the case, judgments, and any sort of like blog posts or whatever that I want to do at that period, I will then move on to academic commentary and journals, which are really important for my argument, because you need to be relying on them and sort of like critically analysing them and building your argument around academic commentary throughout pretty much the whole essay, and use them with relation to case law and stuff as well. So I find them so important. So I will do a lot of reading. Like how I know I do best in essays is by reading as much academic commentary as possible, like really getting into it, copying and pasting a lot of notes. This might not work for everyone, but I copy and paste a lot of the quotes and notes and stuff and make notes on it as I go into my master document of notes, and I find this really helpful for understanding, really helpful to come back to when I'm writing the essay. Yeah, so I really do go in on the academic commentary. So to find academic commentary and like articles and things like that to read, I will first look at any extra reading or reading lists that are on my like virtual learning environment, and then I will make a list of any ones that I think are relevant and work from there. So that's a really good place to start with finding academic commentary, because obviously your tutors know what like good articles are to read. So I will start with that. And with regard to knowing if it will be relevant for your essay or not, I will always read the introduction and the conclusion first, and then sometimes read the headings just to see how they're arguing it, because their arguments should be in the introduction and the conclusion. And then I'll know if it's relevant to my essay, so I'll know whether to read it or not. And then from there, I quite often sort of like, I will sometimes Google things that I want to know or subjects that I want to have academic commentary about, and that sometimes works for me to finding academic commentary. Also, I will look at footnotes that any scholars that I'm reading have used and see if I can find another article from their footnotes, so like footnote hopping. You can also search by citation as well, so if you're looking for something that's been cited, you can do that. When I'm building up sort of like a list of a little bit of a reading list, like a provisional reading list, I'll put like next to them yes, no, maybe, and sort of might work my way through the reading list that I've made myself, and quite often it will take me off on a bit of a tangent and I won't always end up reading what I expected to or finding what I thought would be relevant, but it's always a good place to start to make like a little provisional reading list and yeah, look at the reading lists that are provided. While I'm reading articles, I will try for my sort of future sanity when I'm doing the footnotes, put the full article name at the top, put a link to the article underneath it for where I found it in case I lose it, and then also if I ever copy and paste anything or like summarise an argument, I will put the page number next to it for like everything that I write, so it's really easy to reference or find the thing that I wanted to find rather than having to go back to it when I'm doing all my footnotes. The same that I do with any paragraphs for any judgments or anything like that that I read as well. And then basically I do a lot of reading, and that is basically how it goes. I just keep reading until I sort of feel like I have a form of an argument. Depending on like when I get to the point that I feel like I know how I'm going to be making my argument is when I will start splitting up into my headings and my sections that I know I'm going to split my essay into, and really sort of like refining that and working on each section, and obviously like trying to make sure that they're cohesive. And then the next thing I go on to is actually writing the essay. So I will sometimes sort of plan, but my planning is probably in the looser sense of the word, and I don't think that this is sound advice, but I very much find that once I start writing, it really starts coming together in my head. And if I plan, perhaps I need to do more comprehensive plans. I don't feel like it's a useful use of my time personally, because I don't work well like that. But I find that if I've just got my main headings, I'm not even sure what my complete argument is, like 100% what my argument's going to be, until I've started really typing and writing out some of my essay and writing out some of the sections. So I don't start with my introduction, so I don't write that first. I usually have a rough idea of what I'm going to argue. I always know what I think, and sometimes that can even mean once I've started writing my paragraphs, I can have like a question, and then I'll go and do a little bit more research and then start writing about that as well. If I write out the sections of the essay that I have sort of planned, I might then have to go back and think how I'm going to link them all together really well. It might come naturally to me while I'm writing the essay, like sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly how to link that to the next part, but it will sometimes mean going back to different sections and jumping between the sections and adding in sentences and little bits of analysis so that it's like really thorough and consistent through my essay. And then after that, what I will do is I'll write my introduction and my conclusion, because they're both sort of stating your argument. For me, the introduction is saying this is what my argument is and this is how I'm going to say it, which will usually be this is my argument and I'm going to argue it with reference to, and then state the headings that I've decided on. And then the conclusion will be basically like rounding off on it, and then also just trying to have like a punchy ending and like a really nice circular structure, so it sort of comes full circle and ends on like a punchy conclusion. And sometimes that'll be like a suggestion for reform, or saying that the law's inadequate in that area, or that some sort of like constitutional order is at risk or something like that. So yeah, there are many ways to have like a strong conclusion or an ending, but it very much depends on what sort of stance you take. And this is another thing that I do, is that I will always take a stance. So I think some essays very much sort of stick to what is being asked of you, or don't necessarily take as much of a stance. Obviously you need to make sure that you're still really answering the question and you're completely answering the question throughout your essay, but the way that I interpret it and the stance that I take then informs and shapes my essay. It'll be what the question's asking, but also like a reflection upon it, or what I think it means for the future, or what I think the implications of it are, if that makes sense. So I will be answering the question throughout my essay to prove my stance, if that makes sense. And then with regard to sort of what I'm doing throughout the essay is basically just analysis, looking at academic commentary, looking at the judgments and sort of trying to analyse, respond to them, sort of pit them against each other sometimes, say to what extent I find them convincing, explain why my argument perhaps is more convincing, using academic commentary and case law to really shape my argument, and making sure that I'm not just stating stuff and really responding to everything that I say and thinking, have I analysed everything? Have I responded to everything that I'm saying? And does it all sort of link together? And does it actually contribute to my argument, or am I just stating some fact? Because word counts are so limited, I try not to waste too many words on like describing the facts of a case or anything like that, because they're usually quite familiar with it. So I use as few words as possible on description and really go in on the analysis, because that is what gains the marks. So I really hope that that has been helpful. This sort of method has served me well so far, and obviously some things might not work for everyone and you should listen to your tutors and everything like that, but these things have all worked really well for me so far, and this is basically how I do it and how I always write essays, and I get a lot of messages asking about this, so I thought it would be useful for you guys to hear as well. I hope it hasn't been too rambly, and do pop any questions down below if you have any and I'll try and get back to you. But I really hope that's been a little bit helpful. I hope you have enjoyed the video, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed it. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope it's been helpful, and I will see you in the next video.